Concealed carry is the idea that you can carry a weapon without having to presently show it. So that means that it can be on a holster with your shirt covering over it. It can be in a bag.
And so there's a lot of concern, a lot of interest about this subject out there. And it needs to be, the conversation needs to be held by people that are level-headed.
So to get the license, it's basically 2 steps. The first step is to take the training, and then after you take the training, you apply for the license. And the training's 8 hours, 6 hours classroom, 2 hours at the range with live fire. And then the application process, it goes through the sheriff's office. They have a set fee, $67. You pay that, turn in your application, they process it, do your background check, and then they issue the license after that.
Larger law was enacted back in 2004. It was what back then was revised amended House Bill 12 that created the ability for Ohioans to obtain a permit to carry a concealed handgun. At that time, there were very few states that permitted individuals to carry. Ohio joined their ranks.
Longest training, but it's getting better, a little bit easier, but it's still probably on the harder end, I guess.
Speaking personally, concealed carry is okay with a permit. People are more likely to use a weapon if they have one already, and so making it so that way everyone has a gun means that more crimes of opportunity will happen.
And there are 2 sides to this. There are the students that might live in bad parts around campus. They have this feeling of dread walking to whatever. But then you also have the students that are concerned with students being armed. They want to feel safe too.
Well, statistically speaking, that doesn't help. More people with guns harms more people. And so if we're to take that analogy of, in the home, we know this to be the case. We know this to be the case in many instances. But if we take that into a broader scale and everyone is carrying a gun, we know that violence will increase. We know that that will be the case.
You allow more people to carry firearms, you will have more guns out there. Yes, that's the way it works. In terms of how it affects crime, if you look at Great Britain, Britain has one of the toughest firearms laws anywhere, and they have one of the highest violent crime rates in Europe.
The law, you're allowed to carry arms, essentially, and the language of that is debated, what that means exactly, and that's where this question comes into play. What does a strong or a well-regulated militia, what does that mean? Now, I think they have the right to argue it, whether or not that is something that is constitutional, whether or not that is something not even constitutional but good is another question.
When the concealed carry law went into effect, under state law, there are certain areas where a concealed carry permit is not valid. Daycare facilities, churches, state property. Now what that means is you can have a firearm in a church. You can carry a firearm onto campus. You just cannot have it concealed on your person, because that little piece of plastic that says you have the ability to carry a concealed handgun is not recognized in that location. And you have the same thing here on campus. I'll tell you though, it's interesting because that day when there was that threat made against Ohio State and they had the time, the 3 o'clock, and I was sitting here waiting for 3 o'clock to strike. I was sitting here thinking, I'm kind of worried that there might be someone walking around with a gun on campus. And I'm like, good grief. That's what those other students were feeling and were trying to convey. I know, I get it now.
Anytime you have a gun-free zone, you're opening up an area to be attacked. And because if there's no firearms in that area, it opens it up to a criminal can bring firearms in that area, and then they don't have any opposition. So opening up concealed carry to students. Now, how many students will actually take part in it? I have no idea. It'd probably be pretty slim, especially since it's probably not the people in dorms, it's the people off campus and all these things. So it's numbers-wise, it's going to be so low. It's not going to make too much of a difference. And they have concealed carry on campuses on other states, and you can read are they having problems? We don't hear about it, right? So what's the argument? It's an emotional argument.
10 up there. Okay.